I'm very proud to say that I've played a small part in our next guest being here today. I interviewed her on radio back in November. She was born in Leeds and then returned to Ireland with her mum to be here, to be adopted from here in the very early 1960s. She was adopted by a couple who I believe were from Kerry, and she was brought to the United States where she grew up. She came back here once in the 80s. At the time, she was beginning to look for her mum and look for her dad. She found her mother. Her dad had passed away, but she spoke to me last November about being reunited with all sides of her birth family and how it had been for her and how wonderful it had been. And she said she'd never set foot here since that day in the 1980s. So I said, would you come in June to be with us? And she said, well, as it turns out, I'm coming to Ireland in June anyway. And she's here right now, ladies and gentlemen, Mary Jo Sullivan.
Oh, here we go again. No worries, no worries. Oh boy, here comes the rain. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mary Jo, and I am very honored to be able to be here today to speak to you about my journey, about finding my mother, about going to America with that rich Yank, as you say, although they weren't rich. I am a woman and I'm a child of Bessborough as well. Although when my mother was pregnant with me, my father knew that she would be well taken care of, or better taken care of, if she did go to England to have me. He felt that she would get better care. And it turns out, from what I'm understanding, that she of course did get better care. Then when I was about 3 months and was able to leave, they wanted to leave her, and they wanted her to go ahead and get back to Ireland because she was referred to as a PFI, pregnant from Ireland. And then the English would not want to support her anymore at all in order for her to come back. So she did come back, and she came down into Bessborough. It was here that I grew up. It was here that I walked through those doors, and it was here that I walked and learned about my own self in the world that I was now becoming of. In about 3 years, then my mother got me ready and walked down the long halls of Bessborough hand in hand, and I was taken from her. I was adopted by two immigrants, the Sullivans. They were from County Kerry, Ireland, and in Ballyduff, actually, is where they were from. And they needed a new life and a better life, and so they immigrated into Ireland, into the United States, into Missouri, which is in the middle of the state, and they could not have any children. They knew the torture and everything that was going on back here in Ireland, and they wanted to adopt children themselves. So they decided they were going to adopt Irish kids. And at that time, they had already adopted one from Limerick, my sister Margaret. She was from Sister Ida's in County Limerick. And then she and my father could not come back to actually get me. So they knew some friends that were on their honeymoon, and the McDonoughs. And the McDonoughs were coming back to Ireland on their honeymoon, and just asked them if they would bother to just kind of stop by and bring back a 3-year-old child. So they go over their honeymoon, they come back with a 3-year-old, and to me, that's pretty quick. So, you know, it was fortunate for me that I was adopted and that I was taken out of the possible situation that I was in. My entire life, I always wondered who I was, who am I, why do I enjoy the things I enjoy, why do I have sharp little legs, why am I brown-eyed, brown-haired, freckles, why do I love the music as much as I do? But for me, I was able to grow up 100% completely with the Irish culture. As my father, Pete Sullivan, he played the bagpipes in St. Louis, one of the first Irish bagpiping band in the city of St. Louis, and he also started the first Irish dancing class in St. Louis. So I grew up with my entire heritage my whole life. I was not stripped away like many of the friends that I do know in St. Louis that were adopted from St. Patrick's or Sean Ross. They were taken and put into different families where they knew nothing of their heritage and did not grow up the way I did. So I was very fortunate in order for me to be able to have that upbringing. So I had a very, very good life. But there again, something was always missing. Something was always missing. You go to school and you go with friends and you see that they all look alike. They all might talk alike. They all have friends and families and aunts and uncles and everyone that are alike. And I had no one that was alike. I had no one that I could compare myself to or to blame for why I have little short legs or anything else that was going on. I had no one to talk to about it, really. My sister, she wasn't really one to talk about much of that, and my mother certainly was not one to talk about it. So in 1980, as PJ said, because I was such a I was very, very demanding that my father do something to help me learn about who I am. So he did bring me back here in 1980. Went up through the doors, and Sister Sardo was sitting, and she wouldn't speak to me at all. But I did have a little nun named Sister, and I see the head shaking. They know the name. In fact, I would think that she was leaving in the car, and I must have ran after her in the car or something. It was crazy. She wouldn't speak to me, but I did have a little nun named Sister McManus, and she took me by the hand, and she says to me, "Oh, God bless you, one of our own coming home to see us." And I thought, no, I'm not. I'm not coming home. This is not my home. Not my home at all. But she was so lovely and sweet, I thought, all right, I'll give her a break. So what I did is I let her show me around the house and inside where I was played and where I was probably put in as a child, where I ate and where I played with the other kids. After that, I started to really think even more and more and more and more about it. My adopted mother died in 1981, and then my adopted father, Pete, died in 1998. And that's when everything was revved up in my heart. I once asked them about my parents, about my mother, and about my real biological family. And their response was, well, aren't you happy? Didn't we do a good enough job with you? Are you not happy of the life that we've given you? And that had nothing to do with it at all. Because unless you're an adoptee, you don't understand what we are thinking and what we are going through. The question in your heart is always, who am I? Who am I? Luckily, my parents did not change my name, nor did they change my sister's name. But I do know, as Deirdre pointed out, that names were changed. And that was a tragedy. One day, I was in a pub, and I met a gentleman, a very sweet, nice gentleman. And his name was Pete, just like my father. And he had just come back from Ireland. And we started to chat. And he said to me, "So you're adopted from Ireland?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he goes, "Oh, you're one of those devil babies." And I said, "Oh, you know my family. Did you meet my family? Oh, did you know them?" And he said, "I know all about everything. Father, our Bishop McQuaid, and everybody that started this whole business." So we had a chat. We gave our information to each other and we parted. And a few months later, he called me up and he said, "I've got something for you. I've got a website. It's called the Adopted People's Association of Ireland, the APA." He says, "Go on that website and maybe you'll find out something. You'll find maybe somebody will chat with you or they'll talk to you or they might help you find something." Well, I went on it for months. It was 24 hours. I nearly lost my job. I couldn't do anything but stay on that website. Finally, didn't even take about 2 or 3 months, I got a response. I was over the moon. The lady that responded to me was Bernadette Joyce. And when I told PJ in the interview that I knew Bernadette, he was absolutely over the moon because he knew Bernadette Joyce very well. And Bernadette was the one who helped me. She listened to me. She heard my cry. She heard my desperation. And she said, "I'll help you. Give me all the information that you have and I'll help you." She said, "The first place you're going to start is to go back to Leeds. Go back to Leeds. Go back to the St. Margaret's home where you were from and see if there's any information whatsoever about where your mother might be. I said, right, I will. Well, my adopted father, Peter, had a sister in England, in Basildon in Essex in England. And she said, and I talked to her and I said, look, this is what I want to do. And she said, absolutely. She supported me 100%. So I went back and I went to the house to St. Margaret's, and they told me that there was no information, that all the notes and everything went back to Dublin. So in desperation, I said, please, can you just check one more time? Please just check one more time and see if there's anything at all that you can find. So with that, again, seeing my desperation, she did. She went and she looked into the office and she went through some records, and sure enough, she found one little 8x10 piece of paper that had my mother's name, where she was reared, who she stayed with when she was in England, how much money that she had to pay in order to birth me, and when I left. With that, I was absolutely over the moon. I couldn't believe that I got this information all these years, and here's that one, and I'm so glad and thankful to God that I just did not give up. And I said, please just check one more time. I came back, I faxed her the information. Within a few months, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, oddly enough, I got a phone call, and it was Bernadette. And she said, Mary Jo, we found your mother. And with that, I just sank. Excuse me. To my knees. And I said, how did you do that? She said, well, I called the parish priest, and they like to talk. And so, yeah, most of you probably know. She said, yes, she comes back and she visits Cavan. That's where she was from, County Cavan. And she said that's where she visits the church. She's in Dublin. She was married, and her name is Martin, Mary Martin. She's talked to me quite a bit. So with that information, Bernadette, God love her, she got on the phone, she got a hold of my mother and called my mother and let her know that there was someone in the United States that was looking for her. And what happened then was a letter was sent to her, to Bernadette, with a lot of identifying information. She wrote a letter, sent a picture, and in that letter, she said that I was healthy, she was healthy, and she hopes that that's good enough for me and that she's glad that I had a good life. Well, I'll tell you what, Deirdre, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough for me. She could give me a cup of tea at least. I didn't care if she took me in or nothing. I would have sat on the side of the road just to see her, just to know that I had a mother. So with that information, I called back Bernadette because when we got a hold of my mother, I was doing a diary of my own, pictures, the best ones that I could find, by the way, and of my weddings and my, of my growing up and how wonderful things were. And I don't blame her for anything. I don't have any issues at all with anything. And for her, she did what she had to do. She did what she was forced to do. And that I still cared for her and loved her, even though I didn't know her yet. Not knowing that the other letter was coming over saying she didn't want to see me. They exchanged, and I was absolutely brokenhearted one more time. When I called Bernadette up, she said, Mary Jo, that often happens. The mothers often are shocked and scared to have the sin revisit them, as one priest told my mother when she found out I was looking for her. She went to her priest, and the priest said, don't let the sin revisit you. And that was very cruel, because we were not sins. We were not devil babies. We were innocent children. With that, she said, wait 6 months. And I said, all right. So I waited 6 months, and this was unbeknownst to my mother, since I had the address that she sent Bernadette, knew the house number, I knew where she was. I thought to myself, well, I'm going. We'll see what happens. So I walked down the street on Botanic Road in Glasnevin, where she lived. Nice big house, and I thought, okay, this might work. Didn't see a thing. I thought, oh. Walked back up, and then I saw a woman out in the door. She was pouring hot water on the sidewalk. She told me she was killing ants. I thought, okay. She had beautiful hair, red lipstick on, all dressed nice. And I thought, oh yeah, she could be my mother. I like that. So then I went around the corner, and I was just absolutely pale white. I couldn't speak, which is extremely unusual for me. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something right now because she's here. And I don't know if she's going to be here in another day or two. So I walked up, opened up the big wrought iron gate. I walked up slowly, knocked on the door, and I saw a silhouette coming toward me. The door opened, and we stood literally eye to eye. And I just kind of stepped back a little bit because I just didn't know what to say or what to do. I just stepped back. And I didn't say anything for a few seconds. And she said, can I help you? And I said, are you Mary? And she said, I am. I said, are you Mary Martin? And she said, I am. I said, I'm your daughter. I'm Mary Jo. And with that, she put her hands out like this. I didn't know if she was going to hit me over the head with a pan. I wasn't really sure what was going on. But she put her hands and pulled me into the parlor. We sat together, hand in hand, and she started to cry and to apologize. And I said, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have nothing to apologize for. I am not here for that. I just want to get to know you. We had a cup of tea, chatted a bit. I told her I was staying at the Sunnybank Hotel, and if she'd like to see me, we'll carry on. Well, the next day she did. She called me up. We went and had another cup of tea, chatted a little bit more, and then I had to go back to the States. About 6 weeks later, I called her, and I said, I just want to make sure that you remember I'm here. Do you remember that? Oh, yes. Will you come back over to see me? I said, I will, absolutely. So I came back again, visited with her. She took me to church, took me around to everybody, but she introduced me as her cousin from America, not as her daughter. She didn't tell me she had cousins in America. I had no idea. So when people asked me questions, I didn't know what to say. I said, Mom. And she allowed me to call her Mom, because this is 3 years this went on. This went on for 3 years, that she kept calling me her cousin from America. And finally, I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I feel like I'm abandoned again, and this time by my own mother. I can't do it. I was a flight attendant at the time, and I said, how about you come over to the States? You've got grandchildren, real grandchildren. Now, her husband had died 6 months prior to me knocking on that door for the first time, so she was on her own by herself. She said, all right. So she came to Chicago, and in Chicago I met her, and then she came to the house. I was single at the time, but I did have children, and I now have 11 grandchildren. She met them all, And she said she was going to come back to Ireland and she was going to tell everyone that I was her daughter, not her cousin from America. She never told anyone she had a child at all. Not her husband, no one. Of course, she did not marry my father. Anyway, I didn't believe her. But then when I did get back as her daughter and not as a cousin, I was just elated. I felt like I came out of a closet, kind of like, LBGT people. I can finally come out as a real person, finally. Now, we had a relationship, a great relationship, for about 15 years. And then my mother got cancer. I came back over and took care of her. I came over back and forth all the time. And she came over to Ireland many times. And I came over, I gave her a great wake, an Irish wake, in the house. Her body is buried in Glasnevin, but her memory lives in my heart forever. And if I owe so much to Bernadette Joyce, I can't tell you how much I owe to her. I thank PJ. I thank Orla Ryan from the Journal IE. I thank all of you here for being here and supporting all of us as we continue with this redress to get our rights as human beings and to remember the mothers that suffered so much at the hands of this treacherous place in Bessborough. Now, if you're wondering about whatever happened to Pete Gallagher, I married him. He's right there. Thank you very much, all of you. And for the record, through the DNA and ancestry, I found my birth father's family, and we met in 2018. I'm a Quinn. Thank you.